Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this flower wirework fidget ring. So it's a really cute design and I do have two different versions of it, one where the flower is weaved and one where it's not weaved. So of course it's up to you whichever one you prefer, but regardless on both of them the flower moves, so you can spin it around while you're wearing it whenever you feel like you need to fidget with something, but at the same time it still looks cute. So if you want to learn how you can make your own, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. The wire that I'm using is a regular round copper wire, and the first gauge here is a 0.8mm. This is our base wire. Then we need a 0.4mm for our weaving wire. A 0.3mm is optional if you want to have a weaved flower. And finally a 0.6mm to make the coils with. As for the beads we need, first of all I got a 6mm Rose Montee. This is going to add a lovely sparkle to the very center of the flower. And then a 3mm bead. I'm using a metal spacer beads, and this is just going to be a mechanical part of the ring. And then we need a few tools as well. So first of all I got my flush cutters to cut our wire with, tweezers and nose pliers to help manipulate the wire, and round nose pliers to make loops with. Now beyond our pliers I'm also using this coiling gizmo so we can easily make the coils, and I'm using the 5mm rod for this. I'm also going to be using this steel block along with this jewellery hammer to help flatten the coils, but if you don't have all these tools available to you, you can often find things at home that you can replace them with. But there will also be links in the description box down below that might be helpful. Otherwise let's get it all ready and let's get started. Then we need to cut some lengths of wire, and first of all I have two lengths of my 0.8mm here of about 15 centimeters each, and these will be for the ring band. Now for the weaving wire for the ring band, that's the 0.4mm. I'm leaving that attached to the reel, that way we have minimum wastage. So we're going to start on making the ring band, so I'm grabbing one of my base wires first of all, and then the weaving wire. And I'm just going to leave a short little tail of the weaving wire, and then start towards one end of the base wire, but make sure I also leave a bit of length there. Then I'm going to wrap the weaving wire around the base wire just once there, so it's now attached, and then straight away bring in the other base wire and lay that above the first one. And then I'm going to take my weaving wire and bring it over the top of both of them. Make sure to push that down, come up between the two to wrap around the top one by itself, come all the way down behind. Now I'm just going to take my tweezers and nose pliers, help push my wraps nice and tight together, and then otherwise we just need to continue. So this was one round of the weave. We need to go around the bottom one, and then we need to go over the top of both of them, come up between the two so we can go around the top one by itself and come down behind. And again I'm just pushing them nice and tight together. And this is the diagonal wire weave. It's my personal favorite, but you can of course use whatever weave you prefer with two base wires. So I do have a playlist full of different wire weaves that you can look through. I'm going to leave a link to that in the description box down below. Otherwise we just want to continue weaving like this until we have the length that we need for the ring band. So then I have the length that I need here, and a tip to know how much you need to weave is to get your ring mandrel and then a piece of scrap wire or cord, anything you have handy, and then obviously on the size that you need, bring the wire around, and then you just want to put a bend into the wire where it ends up, and you need to make sure there's a bit of a gap there so it doesn't meet up with itself completely. And you can remove it, straighten it back out, and then here you have a length of wire that you can compare to so you know when to stop weaving. And I can then go in and cut off the weaving wire here because we're done using it. And then I need to grab the ring mandrel and we need to just shape this. So place it on the ring mandrel and bring the ends around to the point where they start overlapping. But like I mentioned, we want to make sure, as you can see here, that the weave doesn't quite meet up on the ends, that we have a bit of a gap between them. And then what we need to do is make some loops on both ends of our length here. Just work on one end at a time. So first of all I'm going to separate out the wires, just out to each their own side, so that I can fit my pliers in. So I'm going to use my round nose pliers and get towards the tip of the pliers so we get just a small little loop. Start with one wire at a time, grab onto it right down where you can't get any closer to the weave, and bring the wire around the pliers all the way so we get a full circle, something like that. And then you just want to do the same with the other wire as well, bring it all the way around, and then we can cut off the excess. So you just want to cut the wire off right where it starts to overlap itself, but we still have that full circle. And of course do the same with the other one. And then we just want to flatten it down so the end is not sticking out and away from the piece. And then you just want to flip it around and do the same thing with the wires on the other end. And then you can see we have the loops on both ends now, and they're going to meet up nicely right there in the middle and have a little platform we can then attach our flower once we've done that. And we can also just finish off the weaving wire here. So you just want to grab one at a time and just make sure it's wrapped around a single base wire. Go in and cut off the excess, and then just push that little end out of the way so you can't feel it, and especially on the inside there because that'll be against your finger. And repeat the same with the other one. So now we have the ring band in place, it's time to make the flower. And for this I'm going to be using my 0.6mm wire, and I'm also leaving this attached to the reel. Then I take my coiling gizmo and attach it to my desk using the clamp. You put the rod through the corresponding holes and just wrap the end of the wire around the handle so it doesn't move around. And then you just want to start coiling the wire around the rod. Now it's up to you how much you want to do. For a single flower, we don't need a lot of coils, but I personally like to make more. That way you can either use it for multiple rings or for other things as well. And also just to avoid not having enough. And then once we have our coil here, we can remove it from the rod just by slipping it off like this. And then I just want to cut off the excess wire there so we have a little bit of a neater end. So now what we need to do is start turning these coils into our flower. So first of all, we need to push these sideways a little bit. So right now you can see you have the coils completely stacked on top of each other. Now what I'm going to do is start pushing them a bit towards the side. So basically splay them out a little bit. You can see just like this, just to kind of give them a direction. We don't have to flatten them completely. Just make sure that they're all then facing in the same direction here. Go all the way along and just gently push them more towards one side. And then I'm going to bring in my steel block and then take my coils here and lay them down so that angle is facing in that one direction. And we need to start hammering this. So we don't want to just go in and hammer it completely flat. We need to do it gently because basically by hammering it, we're just going to help them separate more. So you can see just gently go in and hammer here. You can already see they're starting to separate out a bit more and get a bit flatter as well. So just keep going all the way to the other end and just go back and forth and help them separate more and more. And don't worry about the shape that it's getting. You can always adjust that. Now once I feel it's only so much more I can do with the hammer because it's pretty flat and I don't want to go in and damage the wire too much either. So as you can see, it's not quite looking like a flower yet. We need to separate them out a little bit more. So each of the coils here will look like an individual petal. So just keep gently pulling them. You can see they're separating out more. Just move your way along and do it so all of them look pretty nice and even. And you want them to end up so they're basically sitting just touching each other on the side there. So do it all the way. So I now separated out the whole length there, and as you can see, that short little coil that we had has turned into quite a long length of these individual petals, and there's plenty here to make multiple flowers if you want to. And don't worry about how the ends are looking a bit funky, because what I'm actually going to do is undo them a little bit. So we also need a bit of a length on either side of the coils that we're going to need. So I'm going to start to actually undo one end, just roll it against the coils, and then what we need to do is obviously start making a flower. So I'm going to start to shape this around so the coils here, or the petals, whatever you want to call them, are facing outward. I'll start to bring them more around in a circle, and what I'm going to end up with is using 8 of these coils to create the flower shape that I want. So just keep bringing them around until we start to get something that looks a bit like this. So I just want to double check the amount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I know these are the petals that I need. What I'm then going to do is cut off the rest of the length here, but making sure I have a few extra coils like that. And then you obviously have whatever you have left here to make more or use it for something else. Then I'm going to just do the same with these coils here as I did on the other end. So you just want to undo them, kind of straighten the wire back out. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be completely straight, just so we have a decent length of wire that we can work with. And you want to do it right up until that last one. So we have 8 petals in total, like I said, when they're all gathered up like this. So then we have the finished flower shape, but as you can see, it's still open there at the top. So we just need to fasten that. So the 2 ends of the wire are naturally coming over the top of the 2 end petals there. So the one over the top here, I'm just going to make sure it comes over the very first petal on the other end, and then bring it down between the first and second one, and then the one coming on the back there, just going to make sure it comes behind the first petal on the opposite end and come up between the first and second one. So it's basically the same principle, just on opposite ends. And then I'm going to use these ends here to kind of loop around the inner circle. So I'm going to come up through the middle, just make sure I'm holding on to everything else so nothing else loses its shape, and then bring it out towards the outside, and I'm coming down between the next 2 petals, come up in the middle again, make sure it's nice and tight but nothing else loses its shape, and then towards the outside again, coming down between the next 2 petals, and I'm just going to leave it there for now. It's already more sturdy than it was. And on the other side I'm going to do the same. So this is coming up between those 2 petals, so I'm going to go down through the center, hold on to everything else, bring it further around, come underneath, and then come up between the next 2 petals, down through the middle again, and move on, come up between the next 2 petals, make sure everything is nice and tight. You can see I'm moving my way all the way around and basically coming around to the opposite side to where they were coming from and meeting up again. And then we basically just need to finish off these ends here. So just have them coming around as if you're doing another wrap, but instead of doing the full wrap, I'm just going to go in and cut off the excess And then just make sure that I push the end out of the way and just do the same thing with the other end as well. So you now have the flower shape in place with no loose ends of wire. And this is the point where if you want to weave the petals, this is what we're going to be doing now. But if you don't, you can obviously skip that and just move on to the point where we're going to connect everything together. So for the weaving, I'm cutting a length of the 0.3 mil of about 60 centimeters. Then take the length of wire, start towards one end and grab your little flower shape here. And then just start with any petal, it doesn't matter where. Place the end of the weaving wire underneath and just use that tail to hold on to. And then I'm going to use a figure-of-8 weave to fill in one petal shape at a time. So I'm just bringing it up between two petals and then I'm just focusing on this one here. So I'm going to bring the end of the wire down through and then just wrap it around that base wire on one side. Go down through again. And make sure your wraps are nice and tight next to each other. And then I'm going to bring it up the other side of that same petal. Go down through, push that down nice and tight, come up on the same side, go down through again. So I'm wrapping around 2 times on each side every time, and then in between I'm swapping to the opposite side. So now I need to come back to the original side. So come up on the outside of that wire, go down through the middle again, pull it nice and tight, come up again so we can wrap around one more time on the same side of that petal. And you basically keep going like this, filling in the space with that figure-of-8 weave. So I just want to mention that once you reach what's going to be the widest point of the petal here, you might find that your wire is going to start to slip towards the very outer point. So to counteract that, what I personally like to do is continue weaving. So as I'm bringing my wire to the opposite side of the last wrap that I did, I push down those previous wraps and bring my wire through. And then as I'm pulling the new wrap tight, I'm pushing down on the wraps on the opposite side there that we made previously. And just repeat that. So I'm pushing down on all the wraps whenever I'm tightening them. And go to the opposite side. Again, to make sure that this wire doesn't slip upwards, I'm going to hold on to the previous wrap as I'm bringing this wire through. And repeat. And the aim is just to make sure that we don't have gaps between the wraps on the outer edges of the petal. Now, as you can see as well, we don't have a whole lot of space left, so I'm working my way towards the very tip of the petal. And then once you don't really have any more space left for the weave, you can see that at the very tip, then all we're going to do is take the weaving wire, and you can see right there on the tip we have a bit of bare base wire that hasn't been wrapped. So we just want to basically coil this weaving wire around that so it just blends in with the rest. So literally from one side to the other until we don't have any more of the base wire showing. And then we just want to cut off the excess here. So just kind of go around the base wire again, but instead of going down through, I'm just going to cut off the wire. And then just make sure that I push that very end down in between all the other wires so it gets tucked away. Make sure you can't feel it with your fingers. You can flip it around and just get rid of the other one as well in the exact same way by cutting off the excess and pushing it in between the other wires. And there we now have one petal wrapped. Now I still have a decent length left of the wire that I cut ready, so I'm just going to continue using that. Start the new petal in the exact same way. Obviously, if you don't have any more wire or if you run out at any point, just cut a new length and then start working with that. I just personally like to work with a decent length I can use for multiple petals, but also something that's manageable. So really it's up to you how long length you want to work with. But I'm then just going to go all the way around and continue wrapping all the rest of the petals. So now to put everything together, I'm going to first of all cut another 2 lengths of the 0.4 mil, just about 15 centimeters each. That'll be plenty. And then I'm going to grab the Rose Montee and my lengths of wire here, and first of all put one length through one hole, so straight through it and get it into the middle, and then put the other length through the other hole. So we get this cross coming out from the bead, and then we need to bring these down. So towards the back, I'm just bending them downwards there. So they all end up coming down in the same direction. And then from there, I'm going to start twisting it. So hold on to all the wires and then start twisting the Rose Montee just to get the wires right underneath the Rose Montee nice and tight and sitting as close to the back of it as possible. And it looks something a bit like that. Now from here, I'm going to add on my metal spacer bead, and I just want to put all the lengths of wires through the hole in the same direction so it comes all the way up to sit right underneath the Rose Montee. And from there we then need to add the flower that we got ready. Also put all the wires through the center of that, and then this is going to end up sitting on top of the bead there, and that's what's going to create the movement in the piece. But now from here, obviously we need to then attach this to the ring band. So you can see we have these 4 loops. So what I'm going to do is separate out these 4 wires just to opposite sides there. Now what we then want to do is bring in the ring band, and obviously we need to attach these 2 together. So try and hold on to everything the best you can, but put the wires so they sit right in the middle of all those loops, and then just take one wire at a time and start going through the loops from the bottom there, back out towards the top, and just pull it tighter, and take another wire, go through a different loop and pull that tight, flip around, repeat with the remaining ones. And then what we need to do is fasten it in place, because obviously right now the wires are still just sticking out and everything's still loose. So just take one wire coming from the top loop here, I'm going to bring it down towards the bottom and come up through the opposite loop and pull that all the way through, and then again just pull things nice and tight, because that then helps tighten up the ends of the ring band and helps bring the loops nice and tighter together. Come down through the original loop and then just up through again, because we want to do a couple of wraps here so it gets nice and secure. And of course you want to start doing the other wires as well. So bring the bottom one up towards the top, come through that top loop. You can always use pliers as well to help push any wire into place. You can't quite get in there with your fingers. Go down through again, make sure to pull them nice and tight. Come up on the other side again. So we make sure that they're both even. Now repeat by flipping it around and do the same thing with the wires on the other side here. So we also just connect the loops on that side, and then we just got to finish off the wire. So just one at a time, where it's coming out from, just go back through that same loop and pull it all the way through so that the wire ends up wrapping around the base wire that's creating that loop. And then if you can get it through again, do that, and again pull that tight, and then we just need to cut off the excess. So cut it off, making sure there's about 1 millimeter or 2 left on the tail, and then just push that around as if you're doing another wrap, but we just want to tuck it out of the way and hide it in underneath the flower and among all the other wires. And then of course just repeat and do the same thing with the rest of the lengths. And if your ring band has gotten a little bit misshapen while you've been working with, you can always put it back on the ring mandrel and just straighten that out, and otherwise the ring is finished and ready to wear. And you can see this really cool effect of the flower being able to just spin around like that. So it's both a really nice fidget ring that's handy whenever you need it, because obviously it's right there on your finger, but also it looks pretty nice. And I think it would also be pretty cool to make the flower a different color to the ring band, for instance. So you could make it silver or the other way around, just to make it more contrasting. But obviously you can play around with that kind of thing yourself. Otherwise, that's how you make this ring. And now I do have a tutorial for a different fidget ring that's a little bit easier than this one, so I'm going to leave a link to that in the description box down below if you haven't seen it already. Now don't forget, you can check out my shop where I sell jewelry kits and tutorials. Link to that will also be in the description box below the video. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.